England, 1994. Somewhere on the outskirts of London, inside a nondescript industrial building tucked away from the road, a retired printer named Kenneth Mainstone is standing in front of a top-of-the-line Heidelberg press. Around him, sheets of paper, inks, precision tools, and a level of focus that most people reserve for surgery. He's not printing brochures, he's not printing catalogs, he's printing 20-pound notes, and he's printing them so well that when Scotland Yard's finest forensic specialists eventually get their hands on them, one of Britain's most senior banknote examiners will describe what they're looking at with just few words. The most convincing forgery I have ever seen. Over the next 4 years, Kenneth Mainstone and his crew, a gang so brazen, so precise, so operationally tight that the press will eventually name them after a classic British heist film, will pump an estimated £50 million in counterfeit currency into circulation. At the time, that accounts for roughly 2/3 of every fake note circulating anywhere in England. Not some of it, 2/3 of all of it. And when Scotland Yard finally catches up with them, when the trials are done and the sentences handed down, the Bank of England will do something it almost never does. It will admit that the existing pound note is no longer secure, and it will redesign it from scratch. This is the story of the Lavender Hill mob, and the man at the center of it is someone most people have never heard of. To understand Kenneth Mainstone, you have to understand what he was before he became a counterfeiter. He wasn't a gangster. He wasn't a career criminal. He was a printer. A serious, skilled, professional printer. The kind of man who had spent decades mastering one of the most technically demanding crafts in the world. He understood paper. He understood ink. He understood registration, color separation, layer sequencing, pressure calibration. He understood, in other words, exactly how complex printed documents were produced, and by extension, he understood exactly how they could be reproduced. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Mainstone had retired. He had a reputation in his industry. He had a printing plant. He had the equipment. What he didn't have, apparently, was enough reason to stay retired. The man who changes that is Stephen Jory. Jory is a different species of criminal entirely. Born in 1949, he's what you'd call a natural entrepreneur, except his entrepreneurship runs exclusively in directions the law prefers he didn't. In his 20s, he builds a thriving business making and selling counterfeit designer perfumes, not cheap knockoffs, convincing replicas of Chanel, Dior, the big names. He bribes a perfumer to get the actual formulas. He sets up production sites around London. He bottles, packages, and moves units. At his peak, Stephen Jory is credited with essentially pioneering the knockoff fragrance market in Britain. The man isn't without talent, but talent without discipline ends one way, and Jory ends up doing time. When he gets out of prison, he starts dating a woman. Her name isn't important here. Her father is. Her father is Kenneth Mainstone. The retired printer and the roguish schemer become acquainted. Jory, who apparently can't help himself, pitches the idea. Mainstone, who apparently can't help himself either, listens. And somewhere in those early conversations, a proposition takes shape that will eventually force the Bank of England to redesign the most widely used banknote in Britain. The logistics of counterfeiting professional-grade currency in the 1990s are not trivial. Modern banknotes aren't designed to be pretty. They're designed to be impossible. Every element, the paper, the ink, the security strip, the watermark, the microprinting that's invisible to the naked eye, exists specifically to make the document unreplicable by anyone without access to the exact same industrial machinery and materials used by the central bank itself. Or, so the theory goes. Mainstone starts with the thing he knows best, the printing. The Bank of England's 20-pound note at the time is printed using a multi-layer process incorporating intaglio, the technique where ink is pushed into microscopic engraved grooves under enormous pressure, creating that faintly raised texture you feel when you run your thumb across a real note, replicating this with conventional commercial equipment is supposed to be impossible. Mainstone's Heidelberg press is an offset machine. Technically, it shouldn't be able to produce anything close. He modifies his approach. He doesn't try to replicate intaglio directly. Instead, he develops a layered printing sequence that approximates the visual and tactile result through a different mechanical process. It takes time. It takes testing. It takes the kind of patient, methodical refinement that only someone who has spent their entire career thinking about how ink behaves on paper could actually pull off. Then comes the harder problem, the design itself. The 20-pound note at this time features the portrait of Adam Smith on the reverse, with Queen Elizabeth on the front. It incorporates 17 distinct colors, not 3, not 5, 17. Mainstone uses a video disc image of the genuine note and painstakingly separates the design into each of those 17 color layers. He then sequences their reproduction on the press with a precision that later will leave forensic examiners genuinely shaken. The security strip, a thin metallic thread embedded in the genuine paper, is the next obstacle. Mainstone and his crew source foil strips through a separate supply chain, using false pretenses to acquire them commercially. They add the strips to sheets during production and overprint them with white ink to mimic the perforated appearance of the real thread in the genuine notes. The result, under normal inspection, is essentially indistinguishable from the real thing. The watermark, the faint image of the Queen's portrait, visible when you hold the note to the light, is so convincing in Mainstone's version that merchants' ultraviolet detection equipment, the kind used at shop counters across the country, repeatedly fails to flag the notes as fake. Think about what that means. The machines designed specifically to catch this kind of fraud are being fooled. The notes are passing automated detection. They're passing human inspection. They're entering the economy, moving hand to hand, shop to wallet, bank to till, and the system built to stop exactly this is not stopping it. The operation starts distributing in 1994. The business model is straightforward but requires connection. Mainstone and Jory don't stand on street corners. They move in bulk through a network of intermediaries drawn from the London underworld. People who know how to push currency into circulation gradually, across multiple channels without triggering statistical anomalies in the counterfeit detection systems operated by the bank. The notes go out at a discount. If you want £10,000 in counterfeit 20s, you pay something significantly less for them. The mob pockets the difference. Their customers absorb the notes into circulation through gambling, retail, cash-heavy businesses, all the places where a mix of real and fake currency can blend invisibly if the fake is good enough, and this fake is good enough. For 4 years, this worked. The gang expands. They're not just printing notes anymore. They add counterfeit postage stamps to the operation, another revenue stream that requires similar expertise and equipment. They begin exploring the production of fake 1-pound brass coins. The brass discs are being stockpiled. This isn't a side hustle. This is a manufacturing operation running at industrial scale out of a private printing plant that from the outside looks like any other commercial facility. At the height of their operation, the Lavender Hill Mob, the name comes from a beloved 1951 Alec Guinness film about a mild-mannered man who turns to gold smuggling, which the British press can't resist applying here, is responsible for roughly 2/3 of every counterfeit pound note in England. The Bank of England's counterfeit analysis team is watching the numbers. The quality spike in recovered fakes is unprecedented. Whoever is doing this isn't a bedroom operation. Whoever is doing this actually knows what they're doing. Scotland Yard is already paying attention before they know who they are looking for. The investigation gets its name before it gets its suspects. Operation Mermaid. The task falls to Scotland Yard's financial crimes specialists, a team that begins working backward through the recovered notes, examining 16,000 individual counterfeits in the process. They're looking for patterns, geographic clustering in where notes surface, specific batches identifiable by microscopic production details, links between distribution points. This is painstaking work. Counterfeiting investigations don't move fast. The notes don't carry GPS signals. You build the case one thread at a time. The first real break is almost accidental. Bernard Ferrier, one of the lower-level members of the gang, gets arrested by London police. It's not related to the notes, at least not directly. He's picked up with a bag full of counterfeit currency and fake stamps. His connection to Jory starts attracting attention. Investigators note the overlap. They begin pulling on the thread. The decisive break comes from something almost comically mundane. Inside a bundle of recovered counterfeit notes, investigators find a scrap of paper. It's an advertisement for one of Kenneth Mainstone's businesses, a scrap of paper with an ad on it, tucked into a bundle of fake 20s left there by accident, or carelessness, or the kind of confidence that comes from 4 years of never being caught. That scrap of paper is the end of the Lavender Hill Mob. Scotland Yard obtains warrants and raids Mainstone's printing plant, along with several other connected locations. What they find inside is staggering. Millions of pounds in finished counterfeit notes, the printing plates used to produce them, bogus tax stamps, and those brass discs, enough of them to produce 40,000 fake 1-pound coins. The operation is larger than even the investigators had estimated. The arrests come one by one, in the way that Scotland Yard prefers, methodically, carefully, ensuring each element of the case is locked down before the next move is made. Jory, Ferrier, and another member named Martin Watmow are among those who confess. They don't stand trial. Jory receives 8 years. Mainstone does not confess. His defense at trial is, depending on your perspective, either audacious or desperate. He claims he had no idea what the press on his estate was being used for. He says that it was being used to print pornography. The jury does not believe him. In 2000, Kenneth Mainstone is sentenced to 12 years in prison as the head of the counterfeiting ring. He is identified in court as the operational mastermind, the man whose technical knowledge made the entire enterprise possible. Without Mainstone's expertise, the notes are never convincing enough to pass. Without his equipment, the operation never reaches the scale it does. The other members receive sentences of roughly 3 years each. Ferrier, one of the few who doesn't serve his sentence, dies of cancer before he can begin it. The assets are seized. The plant is shut down. The Lavender Hill Mob is done. But the Bank of England's problem is not done at all. Here's the part of the story that goes beyond crime and punishment. When a central bank recovers counterfeit currency, the first question is always, how much is still out there? The answer in this case is uncomfortable. The mob had been operating for 4 years at high volume, distributing through professional networks specifically designed to blend fake notes into the legitimate economy seamlessly. Investigators recovered a significant portion of the material, but a significant portion is not all of it. Some of those Mainstone 20s, crisp, convincing, UV passing, are almost certainly still in circulation somewhere. Move from wallet to till to bank to till again. Too old and worn to raise suspicion, even if someone thought to check. Indistinguishable from every other 20-pound note around them. They're out there. No one can say how many. No one can pull them back. But the deeper problem for the Bank of England isn't what's already in circulation. It's what the existence of the mob reveals about the security architecture of the current note. Mainstone's forgeries had been produced by a retired commercial printer working out of a converted estate building. He didn't have access to the Bank of England's official suppliers. He didn't steal the formula for the paper or the specialized inks. He reverse engineered the note's appearance and feel using commercially available equipment and materials acquired under false pretenses, and the result fooled automated detection systems. That means the security features on the existing 20-pound note are not adequate against a motivated, skilled adversary with access to professional-grade commercial printing equipment. This is not a comfortable conclusion for an institution that is, fundamentally, in the business of producing documents that are supposed to be impossible to fake. The Bank of England begins a comprehensive review of the 20-pound note's security architecture. The result is a redesigned banknote, released in 1999, the same year the trials are wrapping up, featuring significantly enhanced security measures, new holographic elements, improved color-shifting inks, a revised watermark system, micro-printing refined to a resolution that commercial offset presses cannot replicate. The Adam Smith note is effectively rebuilt from the ground up, with the explicit acknowledgement that the previous version had been beaten. The Lavender Hill mob had, without intending to, performed the most comprehensive and destructive real-world security audit the Bank of England's printing division had ever experienced. There's a strange irony buried in the architecture of this story. Kenneth Mainstone was, by every professional measure, exceptional at his craft. The technical challenge he solved, separating a 17-color banknote design into its component layers and reproducing them on equipment not designed for the purpose, replicating security elements using commercially sourced materials, producing a result that passed both human and automated detection, is genuinely difficult. The forensic examiner who called it the most convincing forgery they'd ever seen was not being poetic. They were being accurate. Mainstone brought a lifetime of legitimate professional knowledge to bear on an illegitimate problem, and, for 4 years, the problem stayed solved. The difference between a career spent as one of Britain's most respected commercial printers and a 12-year prison sentence was, in the end, the direction in which that expertise was pointed. It's a distinction that sounds obvious, but the history of counterfeiting is full of people who crossed that line and found it thinner than they expected, and full of institutions that assumed the line was a wall, right up until someone walked through it. Stephen Jory leaves prison and writes a memoir. He calls it Funny Money, published in hardback in 2002 and reprinted as Lode Simoni in 2005. It becomes a bestseller. He gives interviews. He becomes, in the peculiarly British tradition of the charming rogue, something of a minor celebrity. He dies in 2006. His story gets told on television and magazine in the kind of features that treat audacious crime as a spectator sport, which, when it's far enough in the past and no one got hurt directly, it arguably is. Mainstone keeps a lower profile. The Bank of England keeps redesigning. The redesigned 20-pound note that came out in 1999 is itself eventually superseded. In 2020, a new polymer 20-pound note enters circulation, built on entirely different material, incorporating security features that are physically embedded in the plastic substrate itself, impossible to replicate using any conventional printing process. The Bank of England's long march toward counterfeit-proof currency continues, one forced upgrade at a time. There's a question this story keeps circling back to, and it's worth sitting with directly. How does a retired printer, working out of a building on his own estate, produce fake currency convincing enough to fool the machines built specifically to detect it, and maintain that operation for 4 years without detection? The answer isn't glamorous. It's not genius. It's not special access to secret materials or insider knowledge. It's patience, technical skill applied methodically, and an institutional assumption on the part of the Bank of England that the barriers to professional-grade counterfeiting were higher than they actually were. The paper note was designed in an era when the relevant threat was opportunistic counterfeiting, someone with a basic printer and some photo paper trying their luck. It wasn't designed to stop someone who had spent 40 years learning exactly how professional printing worked, exactly where the tolerances were, exactly what the human and mechanical inspection systems were actually looking for. Mainstone wasn't exploiting a bug, he was exploiting an assumption. The assumption that the gap between what a professional commercial printer could do and what the Bank of England's security required was unbridgeable. It wasn't. He bridged it, and in bridging it, he forced an institution that had been printing money for 300 years to go back to the drawing board on the most widely used banknote in the country. Today, if you pull a 20-pound note out of your wallet in Britain, it's the polymer version, the one with the transparent window, the one with the hologram woven into the plastic, the one where the security features aren't printed on the surface. They're built into the material at a level that no commercial press can touch. That note exists in part because of what happened between 1994 and 1998 in a printing plant somewhere in England. where a retired printer named Kenneth Mainstone separated a 17-color design into its component layers, sourced his foil strips under false pretenses, overprinted them just right, and produced £50 million in fake currency, so convincing that forensic examiners had to look twice. He served his 12 years, and then he disappeared. The Bank of England is redesigning its money, and 2/3 of every fake pound circulating in England for 4 unbroken years had come off his press. Not bad for a retired printer.